Well, hello to everyone. Let me just close some things out so I'm clear. Greetings, everybody. I hope everybody's doing good tonight. I am Nino, and I'm here with the homie Dennis Dunbar. How are you tonight, my friend?
I'm doing well. It's good to see you.
Absolutely. Likewise, my friend. Likewise. I'm glad you all are here. We got a couple people saying hello. David, how you doing? Hello from Michigan. Hello. Hi there. Hello, everybody. Back to everybody. Hello. Right. So what are we doing tonight? Well, we want to talk about frequency separation. And the first thing I wanted to say was that if you've heard that frequency separation is passé and no one uses it anymore, we're here to tell you you've been misinformed. Thank you. Good night. Am I right on that, Dennis?
Sweet. Short and sweet. I like it.
Thank you for coming. No, just kidding. Don't leave. The truth is frequency separation is just another tool like anything else. It's like telling my kid who's learning mechanics on cars that suddenly screwdrivers are not relevant, and they always will be. It's just a matter of how you use the tool, right? So I think that most people, I'll be honest, most people who are coming into this broadcast today are probably stemming from a portrait background, because a lot of people learn frequency separation under the premise of it being for skin, and they don't know any better. Now, I'm not trying to just insult everybody here. It's just that this is the path I went. I don't know about you, Dennis, but 10, 15 years ago, I thought frequency separation was this skin method. And I learned over time it was not. Like, what do you use it for, Dennis? What are those things you do?
I use frequency separation for so many things these days. When I was first trying to figure it out, I read about the technique and read about different ways of doing it, trying to find a use for it. And I was freelancing on site at a retouching boutique called Portis Imaging. Mm-hmm. They're here in LA. And one of my friends, Daniel Ikoff, was freelancing there as well. And I've known Dan since I started out doing this stuff. He kind of helped me learn a few things in the very beginning of things with friends since then. And so I was commenting to him on a Friday one day, like, I'm playing around with this thing, just haven't really found a good use for it. And he made an offhand comment as he walked out of the room, like, well, it's really good for wrinkles. See you Monday. So I went home and like, okay, that Saturday, like, I'm thinking about it, like, wrinkles. Like, well, one of the things that was a real pain as a retouching job was when they said, like, oh, you have to smooth the wrinkles on this clothing.
Yeah. And
the stuff we were doing at that retouching shop, Portis, at the time, was a lot of like activewear stuff for like Nike and sportswear companies. And so there's a lot of smoothing out wrinkles on the clothing. And you try healing it, you try cloning it, you try burning and dodging, and like you hope to hide them just enough to pass. But if you look really closely, like, oh my God, this is a mess. This is like nothing ever worked.
Right.
So I tried the frequency separation on smoothing out the wrinkles on the clothing. Like, oh my God, in 5 minutes, I got something far superior than spending an hour and a half trying to work on some other technique.
Yeah.
Or like, damn, this was really great. So that was when it first clicked for me.
Yeah.
And then a few years later, I was at Photoshop World. Katrine Eisman was speaking there, and I co-authored a book with her. So she gave me a pass for Photoshop World. It's like, okay, great. I'll go to Photoshop World. That was where I met Seth McCullough and Earth Oliver.
Good guy.
And Earth had his frequency separation 2.0 idea that he showed me. And this was like mind-blowing. Like, this solves a lot of issues I was running into with this thing. The downside was I was writing a chapter on the book with Katrine Eisman on Photoshop retouching. And she wanted me to talk about frequency separation. And Earth's technique, his way of setting up the layers, was like a lot better, but like, this is his idea. I can't publish about it before he does. So I couldn't write about it in that chapter of the book. I had to wait till Earth had publicized it and talked about it. So I didn't, you don't steal your friend's thunder.
Sure, no. Yeah, absolutely not.
So ever since then, I've used it for skin. I've used it for product. I've used it for cleaning up backgrounds and retouching backgrounds and stuff. There was a poster I was working on for a Paramount show, King of Tulsa.
Yeah.
Or Tulsa King.
Tulsa King, yeah, with Stallone.
With Stallone. And in this background, they had the dry field background or whatever like that. We had to do a ton of extending on it. Like, well, as you're using a lot of the techniques and stuff to extend out, like we have to add from this much to this much bleed, you know, you kind of run out of stuff to add. Like, well, the texture's looking kind of funky here, or whatever like that. I use frequency separation. So one of the steps was using frequency separation just to bring the texture out and make it look like it was a little bit sharper, because all the other sharpening techniques like weren't working for it. So yeah, I've used frequency separation on so many different things.
Yeah, frequency separation is actually a favorite sharpening method of mine too. Not for everything, but there's some things where I'm like, oh, I know what I want to do here, you know, and I do a frequency separation process, and all I do is keep the high layer and then sharpen in what I want sharpened, for example, you know. And you know, so I mean, we're going to show you guys some stuff in a minute, but keep in mind as you're coming in there, someone says a great show and great Sly. Yeah, Sly is great. Hey, John, how are you, by the way? Camille, Alexander, Stanford, what's up, guys? If you do have a question, pop it in there and we'll try to get to it, but we do want to kind of give a little bit of a demo. Now, I don't want to just throw everything at Dennis, but I'm going to guess most of you have run frequency separation on a portrait. And Dennis, I think, has a good example, or potentially some examples of frequency separation on something that's not a portrait, what the benefits are. Now, we'll tell you this, years ago, where I learned this, I think it might, I don't want to say the name, but one of the top automotive guys, you know, photographers that does all the, like, especially the aftermarket stuff, like Frederick Schlosser and Easton Chang and those guys. One of those guys mentioned that they use frequency separation to repaint a fender on a Porsche that was covered in beads of water. And they use frequency separation to preserve the beads of water. And this was like 15 years ago for me, or 10, 12 years ago. And it was like mind blown, you know? And I realized it's not just for skin. And then, you know, I kept going from there. I used to shoot a lot of automotive back then, not at that level, but that was a big thing for me. Now, Dennis, do you have some non-portrait examples that we can kind of look at?
Yeah, I have some product examples. I can set up and share my screen now.
Yeah, go ahead and share. Let's make sure it works.
Yep.
For those watching, by the way, I used to live stream a lot and kind of got away from it, so I just kind of slapped the tech back together in the last few days. Anyway, go ahead, sir.
Can you see my screen here?
Yeah, I can see your screen. It should be broadcasting.
Okay, and do you see the palette windows?
I see the palette windows. Yeah, we are winning.
Yeah, I tried this a couple of weeks ago when we did a presentation on Andrew Kavanaugh's thing, and for some reason I couldn't get it to work over StreamYard. So this is really great. So with the frequency separation thing, here's one example. This is a shot of an architectural interior photographed by a good friend of mine, Art Gray, and it's a restaurant that was opening up here in the west side of LA. I forgot what town it was in, Manhattan Beach, somewhere like that. And one of the things with the architectural stuff is, especially if it's getting entered in, the architects entering the shot into a competition, it's got to look really, really clean. It's got to look like it really is, but really clean. And the one thing was like, well, all this stuff on here, all these vents and speaker things and stuff that the city requires you to have, it like looks really ugly in the shot. Like, you know, we need to clean this shot up. How can we do that? Well, if I turn this on, that's how we do it. And that was something that would be really difficult. If I zoom in a little bit here, I zoom in, not zoom out. Like you see, like, can you imagine having to clone something like this out little by little by little by little and do this without getting a repeating pattern?
Right.
Or cloning something like this out, you see how the texture changes, the tone changes?
Yeah.
If you're cloning, you have to find exact pixel match for texture, color, and tone all at the same time. With frequency separation, it allows me to separate out the color and the tone from the texture and the detail and make it a lot easier to work with. So in working on this thing, the very first thing I did, I'm going to come over here to paths. The very first thing I did was make a couple of different paths to protect the areas I wanted to preserve. The reason why I did this was I was going to use it as a mask, and it's going to make it easier because I could be much sloppier with the painting and the cleaning up with this. I didn't have to be so careful working around this aspect or working up to this edge or whatever.
Right.
So I was just thinking in terms of making a pen path around the areas I needed to protect for this. Then I made a second one because this little area here I thought I might need as well, but it turned out I don't think I did wind up using it. So I made a pen path for this, and that gave me that gave me this. There we go. That gave me this layer mask. So what I did was I set up, I'm going to turn off the layer mask. I'm going to turn these things off and come down here. And first thing you do when you're making a frequency separation layers, let's turn this off and come here, is I'm going to make 2 copies of this base layer for this. Now, if you've composited, if you've retouched things already, you can merge them into a copy, preserve all your previous layers before, but merge them into a copy so you have a copy there. So I'm going to make 2 copies of this layer. I'm going to select them both, and I'm going to put them in a layer group just because I like to keep things organized.
Absolutely.
I'm going to call this Demo FS because I already have my frequency separation set up here, and I don't want to get mixed up with that. So now I have the 2 layers here. The bottom one is going to be my low frequency layer. So I'm going to turn off the top one. I'm going to name this Demo Low. And it's very important when you do this that you name your low layer whatever it is you want, but name it something that you can identify. So we're going to I'm going to call it Demo Low because I have my low here already. You can see this, I have low and low copy here. So I'm going to do my Demo Low. Now, one of the things I like to do is I like to turn this into a smart object. And it gives me some flexibility and things like that. If I come back here, like, I worked on this a couple years ago. If I come here, what median, what filter did I use? It tells me median, it tells me what the setting is for that. So that's one of the advantages for it. But turning into a smart object is completely not necessary. I'm going to go ahead and do so. There's a shortcut here. I have a shortcut set up where you just go to Image, Layer, Smart Object, Convert to Smart Object. And you can see I have a keyboard shortcut set up here for it. So I made this into a smart object. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, just enough so I can see the detail of what I'm looking at here. And now we're going to add some kind of blur to this. The thing with the blur is you have different choices for this. So if I add a Gaussian blur, which is what a lot of people talk about, if I add a Gaussian blur here and make it something small, what happens with this post here is it blurs the post in and out. It blurs this stuff in and out. It blurs the edges around here in and out. So it's going to make working up to the edge really difficult because I'm going to have to work on this. For this, I'm going to have to keep some of this stuff clean, but the edges are really messy and hard to work up next to. So I'm going to cancel that out because I don't think that's going to be the way I want to go. Some people use surface blur, and that can be really effective. But the one that Earth showed me is you come over here to the noise filter and you use median. And median is kind of like this really cool filter for this. It's set for pixel level. So the amount you set is going to be dependent on not only what you want to lose, what texture you want to lose, but also the resolution of your image. If you're working on something that was shot on an iPhone and you have a 20 megabyte image, there are going to be many fewer pixels than if you shoot it like on a medium format, 150 megapixel capture. Yeah. So the numbers are going to change from one thing to the other. Now,
Dennis, I might interject real quick just to let everybody know. You notice what Dennis is doing. He's like not only giving you guys a demo of the different blurring operators or filters that you can use, he's trying to figure out sort of either subconsciously from his experience or testing which one is the best for the job. Because you probably learned, everybody else out there, probably learned at some point in frequency separation, you learned to use a certain blurring operator, whether it was Gaussian a long time ago or median, and you were told just to use that and you weren't told why. And that's what Dennis is trying to show you, that this can be flexible, never mind the smart objects. Sorry, I just want to throw that in there.
No, that's absolutely a great point to point out, because it's going to depend on what you're trying to do. If I'm working on the skin and I just need to preserve the very fine texture, I will use a much smaller setting than something like this, where there might be lots of texture and things like that I need to get rid of. As you practice this technique, and I'm a huge believer in practice. I was mentioning on a panel event earlier today, I studied Kung Fu for about 20 years. And you realize there's a reason why they have you do a punch or a kick 10,000 times. It has to become a part of you before you can really use it effectively. So in practicing this and trying different settings, you start to realize like, oh, on that job, when I went higher, it made this part easier, but that part harder. Or in this job, when I went lower, it made that part easier. So you're going to start to intuitively pick up what kind of setting to go with for that. I'm not a real big believer in giving people like, okay, for skin, you're always going to go 6 to 8, and for product, you're always going to go 10 to 12.
Right.
It's kind of vary.
Yeah.
But in this case, we're just looking for, if I turn off the preview, we're just looking for something to lose whatever the texture in the screen is. We can see there's some noise and stuff here. There's not a lot of texture there. So we don't need to go really super high. If I turn it back on, this is 6. Like, yeah, let's go with 6. That looks like that's going to work okay. So we're going to go with that. Now, since I like to have a fallback, I like to always work on a copy of these things in case I mess up. I have a way I can fall back.
Right.
So I'm going to make a copy of this layer. And on a Mac, it's just Command-J. I'm going to group it. I'm going to clip it to this layer here. So everything's kind of connected to the base layer for this. And since I'm going to want to paint on it or do something on it, you can't do that on a smart object. I'm going to need to rasterize the smart object. So I come over here to Layer, Smart Object, and Rasterize. There we are. I have a keyboard shortcut for it again. So now we've got that layer set up. Now this layer, we're going to name this one High. We're going to name this Demo High.
And there's a method to the madness. There's a reason why he's naming everything, guys.
Yeah. There's a reason. I talked about this with here, and you're going to find out exactly why you have to intentionally name your low layer so you know what you're doing with this. So what we're going to do here is somehow we have our sharp version and we have our blurred version. And we have to get the texture out of the high version onto something that we can work with. We have to get the color and tone out of this thing so we have a layer that we can work with on that. The way we do that is we're going to use Apply Image, and we're going to subtract the non-blurred from the blurred version. It's kind of counterintuitive. In actuality, you find out this is the way almost all the sharpening works. In the AI world now, there's other sharpening techniques, but all of your frequency, all of your high pass sharpening, all of your unsharp masking, all of your sharpen more, all these techniques work off of the same idea, subtracting a blurry version from a non-blurred version.
Yeah.
So we're going to come over here to Image.
I had a developer, a coder developer, told me that all sharpening begins with blurring. He told me that a few years ago.
Yeah. And it kind of blows your mind, but then it also starts to make sense. So we come here to Image, Apply Image, and it brings up this dialog box. So this is where naming these layers is really important, because it's going to say layer. What layer do we want to work with? We want to work with Demo Low. So this is where you have to have that intentionally named. You have to be able to know which one. If I just went with low, then I wouldn't know which low to work with. So Demo Low, and knows I'm doing a demo. This is the one to work with. Now I'm going to come over here. I'm going to say subtract, because we're subtracting the color and tone from the non-blurred version. So subtract is the way to go here. Now, two other things you have to pay attention to here. One is scale, and the other is offset. Scale determines the strength, how strong this is applied. You get two choices, 1 or 2. In this particular case, 2 is the number you want to go with. It's going to give you the right result. For offset, you notice that what we have here mostly is a bunch of middle gray. If the offset were, say, 0, it's mostly black, because the offset, the base color for this will be black. If I set it to 255, the offset will be white. So since we want to work with middle gray, we want to go with 128, which in 8-bit workflow is middle gray. This is the same number as if you work with it in 16-bit as well. I've seen some people say, oh, you use add and you use this, whatever. You can use subtract, scale of 2, and offset of 128 in 8-bit or 16-bit workflow. It's the same numbers. It gives the same result. So is what we can go with that.
Yeah.
So we have our demo high, and we've got the gray, and now we want to wind up with something we can work with. I'm going to, again, make a copy of this. I'm going to clip it to here just so I can work on this layer, and if I make a mistake, I always start again. Now we're going to come over here, and the magic thing is we're going to come to blending mode, and we're going to choose linear light. Linear light is a blending mode. All of the blending modes in this group here all work off of 50% gray being neutral, not showing up. It's invisible. It doesn't affect your image at all. But anything lighter than that, it's going to lighten your image. Anything darker than that, it's going to darken your image. So linear light turns out to be the right amount of strength for this to use for this. So, and if you look, I zoom in, if we turn on our demo FS, turn it on and off, we don't see any difference. This is how we know we've set this up right. So we know we got it all set up just right, this way. Now I'm going to put this, since I want to be able to paint on here, I'm just going to make a testing here. I'm going to paint here. I'm going to say, see, this is why you want a layer mask here, because I want to be able to work sloppy, but I don't want it to come over here, this stuff. So to get around that, delete that, I'm going to click on here. I'm going to load this path as a selection, the path I'd already made. On another time, we can do a whole class on the pen tool, but it's a very important tool.
Bezier curves, yay.
Yeah, I'm going to go to make selection. And let's say we put in a 1 pixel feather here. Again, this is going to depend on the resolution of your image here, but we're just going to focus on that for now. So we have this as an active selection. We zoom out, we see we have the layer, we have the crawling ants going around the area we need to protect. So now I'm going to click on this and we get the layer mask, but it's inverted. So I'm going, because we selected the wrong thing here. So we're just going to flip that layer mask, Command I flips that around, and now we've got that protected. So now I can come here and I can do my painting, and you see it's not affecting any of these areas here. Now I'm not going to work this sloppily, but I am going to turn off these things here to make it easier for me to see. And to some extent, I can take a brush tool. I'm going to turn the flow down on my brush tool, just give me a little bit better chance of blending. I can select colors and I can just start painting these features out. And I keep selecting the different colors and stuff. And this is why I'm going to lower my flow even more. Just give me a little more chance to kind of blend things out a little bit more, because I don't want to lose all this kind of different look here. I just want to get rid of, I want to blend it in enough so I'm not leaving a telltale sign of what kind of work I've done around here.
Yeah. And it's always a build up. You know, I always kind of liken this kind of process to like what oil painters say. You kind of build it up. You start with a base and then you start getting the right shades and all that. I also want to mention, guys, you know, yeah, we have like a bunch of AI right now and the remove tool and all that and everything. But in a commercial workflow, like what Dennis does, he wants to have full control. That's why he sets up frequency separation manually based on what the job needs. He wants to have anything. The client could come up with any type of request. And if you're reliant on AI removing that air conditioning vent or whatever that thing wasn't thing, it could be, first of all, unpredictable. It could create a weird seam. It might have a different type of bit depth when whatever AI creates. AI is not quite there yet, and doing things the manual way is full control, especially in a commercial situation. In case anybody's wondering, hey man, just AI that. No, we don't AI that if we don't have to.
Right, and the situation with the AI tools, they're really powerful and they're getting more powerful, and I find I make use of them more and more often. The thing you have to remember is, for the foreseeable future, the AI tools are limited to a 1024 by 1024 pixel size tile. So if I selected this big area here and I just said, AI, you know, get rid of these things, it's going to essentially stretch that 1024 by 1024 to fill my selection. And I'm going to lose the detail. I'm going to lose the sharpness and the resolution of it. And if you do this, like when we're working on movie posters and have to extend out backgrounds and things like that, if you do too big of a chunk at a time, when you zoom in, you're like, oh, wow, look, we have sharp detail and we have kind of not so sharp detail here. So you have to work on that really carefully for that. So in working on here, I'm going to turn this back on. And this is the result that I had wound up with in painting these things out here. So this is what I wound up working with. We're trying to do the demo thing. We got maybe a half hour, and I want to show you a few more things. So I'm not going to get too particular about being really exacting with that, but I just wanted to show you what the end result here worked out to be. So now that we have that, we come over here to turn our high on. Now, like, well, now we have ghosts of all these things. This is why we have the copy of this. This is where we have the ghost of it. We're going to get rid of the ghosts for this. This becomes a really, really simple workflow here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to my rubber stamp tool. If I can remember where it is, here we are. Here's my rubber stamp tool. One of the things that you have to be really important here is you have to turn this on to current layer. So the sampling is now going to be current layer. If I have it set to current and below or all layers, it's going to run it through the blending mode and give me a really weird looking result. So that's why in this case, you have to have it set to current layer. And now all I have to think about in this one is what texture do I want there? Yeah. So I've got my tool. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. I'm checking my opacity, my flow, and I'm just going here. I will select different areas just so I'm not being too obviously cloney with it. But you just select different areas here, and look at this. I can work right over the edge of this because my layer mask lets me protect that area so I can be quick and sloppy. Yep. And then you just go through and you just work on erasing all these details that you want to get rid of here. And again, the result here was this is what we wound up working with here. Yeah. And
if you would have fought with that instead of doing the separation and try to do all of this like directly on the image or something like that, you would have just had issue after issue after issue. So by separating everything out, attacking it individually, yeah.
So including making the path, I think I worked like 2 hours on this image per art. And one thing is, if you're working in architectural photography, typically, especially since something like this is like to enter in some competition, whatever, they don't have a huge budget. They don't have $1,000 to pay you to work on this and you know, $1,000 per shot for this. So you have to be really efficient. So I was able to do this inside of an hour or so, including making the path for this. Yeah. Because it allowed me to work really quickly on it. One trick I added to this is, you see I have something up here called solar curves. I'm going to bring over the properties palette. And you see solar curves gives you a curve up and down like this. If I turn this on, it gives me this really rainbowy kind of effect. This is one trick that we use for checking our work. And this thing exaggerates any detail in this up here to an extreme amount. So you can't go by the colors. You're not looking at it for banding issues, whatever. What I am looking for is like, are there remnants? Like, oh, look, there's a little hint of a remnant here. So here's where I would want to come back here and come and clean up this remnant, clean up that remnant. It just gives me a little double check here to look through this for that. So with the solar curves, it's again, there's a bunch of different ones you can have for this. I made this one as just pulling a point up, point down, point up, point down for this. I saved it as a curves preset. So it's really handy for me. But it's just another way of double checking the work for that.
You know, I don't know how many times, especially years ago, I would do something and I said, okay, that's a clean enough edit, I'm good. And then later in my workflow, I start adding contrast and color work and my crimes come out, my sloppy healing come out, you know, and that's because I didn't check my work. I didn't look for those remnants and they came out later in the workflow. So it's very, very important to do that kind of thing. And there's all kinds of check layers that can be used, and solarization is super useful. I'm not telling you that. I'm telling everybody else that in case they're not familiar.
Oh yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I have a Substack article. I'm going to switch over to Chrome here really quickly. Okay. I write articles on Substack. I publish articles on Substack. So one of the articles that I have here is should be. You can see I've written a bunch of ones. There's something about 3 different curves for checking our work.
Oh yeah, I remember that one.
Or maybe it's one I need. Maybe it's one I need to add. Well, I just figured out the next article I need to add, I guess.
Well, I know I've read that before, so if it wasn't from you, it was from somebody.
Yeah. So there are 3 curves that you use to use your work. Solar curves is one. It gives you this really cool rainbow effect. It's really great for spotting like dust specks in the sky. Yeah. Or if you've got, if you compositing images together one of the things that it'd be really good for doing is finding out if there's a little edge of a layer mask or something like that that's showing up and you get a little sharp line or something. That makes it really easy to see this.
Yeah.
Another one would be a curve that, I'm going to make a new curve here. Another one would be a curve that really brightens up your image to an extreme level. So this you used to look into the shadows to make sure all your shadows are clean and things like that. And then one where you darken it down. Now this one, darkening down, is not going to help a whole lot. But if you got something with lots of light colors behind you, you pull this down and darken it, and you can see where there are smudges and things like that. So I covered that in the article for that. So again, check out my Substack. It's dennisdunbar.substack.com. You can sign up and do that, but you'll see the different articles and stuff I post in here. Here's one where the latest one that I wrote a week ago shows the steps for creating the frequency separation layers and things like that. So it gives you that. So I want to move on to another project I worked on that became really useful. So here's a product shot. And for this one, the photographer, Anthony Nex, he's a good friend of mine, does a lot of great product work. He's one of the busier photographers I know. And so he frequently send me batches of images or whatever. And it's like, here's a bunch of instructions, go to town, clean it up for me. And so he shoots a lot of product work for this. In this particular one, he had this flask that he had, and he wanted to get this sort of wave-like look in the flask for this, but he had to hold the flask so they could pour stuff in and get the wave. So wanted to get rid of this and have that look good. He also, these little wavy lines, let me turn off his instructions. These little wavy lines here that he wanted to get rid of all these wavy lines. He wanted to get rid of the bubbles, and he wanted this to be kind of like a nice smooth gradation coming out here. And he also wanted this to look more like a cresting wave. Anthony was a surfer and a skateboarder in the days. The old Dogtown Z-Boy guys, that was how he got it started. They were all friends of his. He hung out with them and started photographing them along with skateboarding, and that's how he got into photography. But anyway, so that was the project that we had to work on here. So how are we going to solve that? There's a bunch of different layers here. I'm going to bring this over, and I'm going to have to reduce the size of the things here so you can see a little bit more of the layer stack all at one time here to see how we go. So I used frequency separation for this, and then had to composite a few different things together for this. One of the first things I did was I took his base layer, and let's turn this off. This was his base layer. I positioned it into the center like he wanted it for that, because originally his background had this thing set up where originally his thing was off center like that. But he also had one where they turned it around. This was the top of the valve, that whatever you call that connector thing they wanted to use for that. So I copied this, and then I set up my frequency separation layers, and come down here. Here's my low. This was a value of 10 I used for this. So we zoom in, and if I turn the thing on and off, you see I'm just looking for how I get rid of the glass texture. And this stuff is all something I could work with paint-wise and cleaning up-wise. So I made that copy. Since we have only an hour here and we got like 20-some minutes left, I'm not going to go through that step again. But then I made a copy of this, and here's where you can start working on some cool things. So not only did I use the paint tool, but the brush tool, but I also used the mixer brush. So to show you that, I'm going to make a copy of this layer. I'm going to use my shortcut to rasterize it. And the way I would work on cleaning this sort of thing out is these little things here. I'm thinking divide and conquer. What are my easiest ways to do this? This here, I'm probably going to start off with using the spot healing tool. I have to pull this over to the side here so you can see I'm choosing the spot healing tool. Spot healing tool I have set for sample all layers, but I could set it to turn this off because I'm going to work directly on this layer. I also have this set for content aware, so it's going to respect the border between light and dark a little bit better. I'm going to make my spot healing tool a little bit bigger. Here, I'm going to come here, play around with this. Might have to get in with some paint to clean that up a little bit better. I've got that stuff cleaned up. This is mostly looking pretty good. But I've got all these lines here. If I try a spot healing tool, it's going to make kind of a mess of that. I could start off trying to eliminate a good number of them this way, so we can see how much success we have.
Yeah, I was going to chime in.
One of the reasons why you keep a background, you keep a copy of it in case you don't like what you're getting. Yeah. What were you about to say?
I was just going to say that, like, for example, like you were doing the healing brush and you saw that it got close enough on that perimeter and you're like, oh, I can paint that later. Well, when you do this enough, whether it's this exact process or anything in Photoshop, really, eventually you'll know if a process is like, okay, that got me kind of where I want to go and I can finish it with another process. That comes with experience, because a lot of times I think even intermediate Photoshop users want a tool to be magic. And that's why AI is so popular right now. They want to click a button and everything is perfect. Well, a lot of times we use a tool to get it started. We use another tool to refine it and another tool to finish it. And that's just a fix. But that's how we have ultimate control. So you'll be able to identify, oh, that's close enough. I can fix that with dodge and burn later or brush later or something later. That comes with time.
Exactly. So suppose this is as far as I could get in a satisfactory way. And I'm like, okay, I want to find another way of approaching this. This is where another key part, and this is part of Earth's workflow, is to use the mixer brush tool. Now, a mixer brush is kind of a mysterious kind of brush. It took me a while to figure out how to make this thing work or whatever. The mixer brush is sort of a way of, if you think about the paint on your canvas being a little wet, it's a way of mixing those colors in with this. So I'm not trained as a painter. I'm not an oil painter. I'm not a watercolor painter. But the idea is sort of like you get a brush and you can pick up some of the color and wiggle it around and smear it around and make that work.
Very Bob Ross. Very Bob Ross.
Yeah. It's a really cool tool for this. In this workflow, there are certain things you have to check to make sure you have set up properly. So the first thing is you want to make sure that you have this set for clean brush. You want to check this here for clean brush, and you want this little icon here to go, and you want this is going to make sure it cleans the brush every stroke. Because if you have it, if you paint here and then you come over here, if there's some of this dark blue paint remaining on here, it's going to come over here and contaminate what you have. So you want this one turned on and this one turned off. Then the next thing I notice is the wet and the flow seem to be a strength control for this. And depending on what I'm doing, when I'm just blending things out, I will probably keep my wet to around 22% and my flow around 20%. Just kind of set kind of low. There's not exact numbers, but just kind of low. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger. And now I'm going to just come here and start wiggling it around. So this little area here that I said I could clean up, I'm going to turn my strength up a little bit more because I noticed it's kind of sneaking up a little slowly, and it's going to, working that precise is going to make the demo a little long. But here I'm able to kind of do this. And part of the workflow is just dabbing and wiggling. And it's really kind of a magical way of blending out these colors and these tones here. And you can go back and forth as well, blending in. I want to get this area here looking really pretty clean. I don't mind a little bit of turbulence here, but I want to kind of make this area clean here. I'm going to clean this up a little bit more. Come over here. This area here, he's going to want to see this kind of continue out. Now, I had done that on this copy here, where I made a copy of this as well. Oh, yes, we want this stuff painted out as well. So you can see here, I can just back and forth, blend this thing out, and I can just keep working this to my heart's content. This was how far I did it on my original one, and then on my copy one, I came through and wound up cleaning this up. So I'm going to do that here. This is Again, using it, just painting this out, trying to continue this line up. If I wanted to really make sure that line was sharp and clean, I would make a pen path for it. And I see I don't have a pen path for it, so that's not what I needing to worry about here. But
oh, that pen tool.
Yeah, love the pen tool.
Love the pen tool.
I'm cleaning this up. Now you're wondering why it's not extending out past here. It's not extending out past here because I have this layer mask that I made using this path. You can see where I started out and then it wound up moving over for that. So here's the basic thing I used for the layer mask for this. And that is what causes this.
Yeah.
So if I turn this off, you can see where my sloppy work is extending back out here. So the layer mask and the pen tool are making that work a lot easier to be really precise with what I'm doing. I also had created a background for this, so I'll turn on my background layers here. And you can see the background layers are basically just some gradations that I built up to get the kind of look that he wanted. But it was a lot easier to work with on a clean background where I just made the background up.
Yeah.
So you get this all worked up to the point where you can go. And then we're going to want to start advancing and working on this. We got this a little cleaner. Now we're going to want to get rid of these lines here. Well, this is the high frequency layer. And again, like I said, we just clean them up on the copy. So it's just a matter of cloning. Again, when you have your rubber stamp tool and you're working on the copy of your high frequency layer, you want to set this for current layer. Because this one, when you make the copy of it, this one is set for normal blending. This one is set for linear light. So if I'm painting here and it's sampling all the colors below here and then cycling it through here again, it's going to double up on the linear light thing and you get a really weird looking result. So that's why you want to make sure this is set for color. All right, I've set for current layer and below.
And really it's sorry.
Oh, now that I've got to this point where it's mostly nice and clean, last thing I want to do is I want to create this wave effect. And this is where next step is here. I can merge these. I can merge this into a copy of a layer. So on a Mac, it's Option Shift Command E, merge that into a copy of a layer. I make this a smart object and I give it a name. Cancel this. I give it a name. I call it FS Demo Merged. That is because if I come back to this months later, like, wait, what did I do with this layer? What was it? Oh, it's this one merged into a copy here. And then I just use the liquefy tool. I just use the liquefy brush, liquefy filter to kind of craft out. Come on, there we go. To craft this kind of shape for that.
Yep.
And then it was a matter of compositing in the nice clean edges for that, adding a little bit more effects for this, and then finally adding it off with adding a noise layer on top of that.
Yeah.
We have about 15 minutes left. I'm going to show a little bit about using it on skin. If we have time for that. Do we think we have time for
I think so, yeah. And I was just going to remind everybody too, if you have any quick questions, throw them in there. I'm monitoring the chat right now. We can try to get to them. But by all means, show us some skin. That sounded wrong. You know what I mean. Show us a skin process. Don't show us any skin, Dennis. That's a whole different platform. We're not doing that.
Yeah. And at this stage, nobody wants to see me that way.
But yeah, seriously, guys, if you have questions, throw them in the chat. I'm monitoring it right here. But go ahead, Dennis.
So during the pandemic, I did a lot of work with a photographer based up around Seattle, a really nice guy, Doug Adams. And this was one of the shots that he did. He was shooting a lot of beauty work, and it was a lot of fun to work on the beauty stuff for him. But the problem was this model here, really good model, but evidently she had just given birth. And I'm not an expert on this. I only have 2 daughters, but I'm not a woman, never been pregnant. But evidently, that process can wreak havoc on your skin for a little while. So her skin was a little less than ideal here. Great model, have a beautiful look, but when you see, like, we've got really this, like, a bit of acne. The skin texture is like really a little overly pronounced. Part of it's the lighting he did. Part of it, he shot it really super sharp. focusing right on this area and then letting it fall off or whatever. But for whatever reason, it's kind of like, okay, you need to clean this up. Now, if I were doing this with spotting and healing and burning and dodging, this would take me hours and hours of work to do. But what I wound up doing was cleaning this stuff up here. There we go. I got most of it cleaned up with this frequency separation work. So you see the before and after here. I got most of it cleaned up. And then I got to a point where, okay, from here I can do the fine finessing with the burning and dodging. And that's kind of what all these other layers here. These are the burning and dodging layers and stuff to really kind of polish off and give her the nice particular skin texture. So the way I set this up was, again, you can see I have several different layers here for that. And we're just going to go through the layer stack I have just so you see what I did. So the first one is the median noise layer. So this is, I ran median noise twice for this. And part of the reason was when choosing it, I wanted to make sure I worked up to the edge and I didn't get these edges looking a little too weird. So this was 8. So I applied 8 twice here. And the thing that you have to watch out for when you're going with the median thing is it can round out sharp corners, or it can sometimes kind of get a little too weird to work up to that. So I don't want to use like a setting of 20 or whatever for this. So that's why I did 8. And then I applied 8 twice. So it just kind of doubles up the effect to build me up to a point of like, okay, here I've got something where that fine skin texture, I've got rid of that. So then I worked on using the spot healing tool, the healing brush, and the mixer brush on these things to get that. So I'm just going to, again, walk you quickly through a demo for this. Here's my copy of it. If I were to use the healing tool, I'm going to first start off with the healing brush tool. Make sure this is set for current and below. And then come here and work this. So work this area here. It makes it really easy because I don't have to worry about the texture at all. I'm just thinking about the highlights and the shadows and the color and the tone and how I get that to work with it. I could also use the spot healing tool. So again, this is set. I don't have sample all layers on. I don't need that for here, but I can come here and clean a lot of this stuff up. And then the other thing is if I wanted to do the blending for this, then that's where I go to my mixer brush. Not my art history tool, I go to my mixer brush. And again, I'm going to turn this down because I find with skin, you have to be really, really subtle. So that's why it was really helpful for me to learn that setting the wet and the flow are going to go a long ways in terms of setting the strength for this. And so here I can just wiggle back and forth, blending things out and trying to get something where I'm getting most of this stuff kind of blended in. I'm trying not to be too heavy-handed here. Here was a little heavy-handed. So you see that it's kind of looking a little painted, a little smeary there. One thing that's really helpful with this workflow is if you have the history brush, come here and click this up before you start mixer brushing. And then I can go to the history brush. And Y is my history brush. There we go. Y is the history brush. I can set this flow down to something low, and then I can just come in here and I can back up to that history state again. And then I can come back and go to my mixer brush again. And now here we go, maybe a little more subtle.
Yeah.
For this. So this is where you got to work on the art for this and work on that really carefully. And again, as you see, this was what I wound up working with on here. And then I pushed it a little further with copy because I kind of felt like, okay, I've gone far enough. I'm going to make a copy of this layer and continue working. If I screw that one up, I don't have to start all over again. So I went to that aspect. And then there's a little bit of work here where I just got in and used paint and things like that to kind of work on cleaning these things up. This was painting some tone in on the bridge of the nose. And this is set for darken and 70%. So I probably just sampled this color here, did a little brush stroke here, set it for darkening. So it's only going to affect the layers that are the colors that are lighter than my paint. And then I use a layer mask to control that. And then I went on to the high texture layer, and I worked on the high texture layer using the same ways that we had shown before. Now, the thing you'll notice is we're doing this, we get rid of all these little divots and things like that with these high texture layers. So turning these on and off, you can see how I cleaned up a lot of this stuff here. But what happens is our texture is still really strong. Our texture is still really super pronounced. So there's a really cool trick I came up with. I think it was using this one, a little light bulb went off. Like, you know what? If I could just tone that down a little bit, turn it down a little bit so I get a little closer to this, I've got something I can really finish off with burning and dodging really easily, because that's something that's really easy to work with on this thing. So how would I just tone down the texture just in that area? Well, I have a layer mask. And with layer mask, we turn this on, we're going to bring up the properties again. If I click on the layer mask, you see with the layer mask here, we have these sliders, density and feather. The density is, I turn this all the way up, my layer mask is working 100% opacity. If I turn this down, I think I had it set to, what did I have it set to originally? If I come here, my history brush, there we go. Disable layer mask, come back here, turn it back on, set for 35%. So somewhere between 30, 40%, whatever like this, is a way of just toning down that skin texture. So to do that, what I did was I just painted black in. And if I come over here in my channels, you can see here where I turn this on and I just painted black all over the areas I wanted to lose the texture in. I avoided her eyes, I avoided her lips, I avoided this eyebrow because that eyebrow had texture in it. And then I turn that on, and now it becomes really obvious I've lost the texture here. So it's too heavy. I want to go subtle. I make sure I'm clicked on the layer mask for that. And then I can just slide this down. And usually somewhere around here, there's like just enough knocking the texture down a little bit. It's just a little hint of the texture being gone. Mm-hmm. So I'm taking 34% of the texture away from those areas. I'm careful to watch how it blends in with the sharp areas, so you don't get blurry sharp, which is telltale. But I get this and it just tones it down.
Yeah.
And since I'm doing that on the layer these are clipped to, I just do it on my untouched high texture layer. I just do it on that, and this layer mask will control these. And then I use that same layer mask. I inverted that same layer mask, and I just came back in and added a little bit of noise back into that, so I just kept some skin texture. Yeah. And then I finished it off with the usual kind of work with the burning and dodging and those kinds of things. Yeah.
And that's why I love to call that process, for lack of a better term, preparing the canvas. Like if you go dodge and burn from right out of camera, you can get it done, but you're going to be there for a while. Whereas if you get the core problems solved with the right tools, dodging and burning is actually kind of satisfying and fun and actually be quick. And you'll notice, guys, that everything Dennis does is flexible, because in the commercial space, especially in LA, he has to be able to undo something, because the art director could come back and say, no, you took too much texture off her face. And he can't say, oh, I'm sorry, I blurred it permanently. Or make himself start over from the ground up. That flexibility is perhaps super necessary in the commercial space, but when you implement such flexibility into your own work, whether it's personal work or private client or whatever, it actually, once you get used to it, it makes you more creative, because you can take risks and you can try things out and you can play, like he was saying, right? And that play is so important. When you're terrified of Photoshop because you think you're going to break something or screw something up, that's not creativity, right? So learning these flexible tools is important. Now, Dennis, I need to get to a couple of questions here. Susan was saying, will a recording of this be available and sent to everybody? And yes, it will. We'll go ahead and email everybody a recording of this, a link. Now, it will live on the NBP YouTube, because this is presented by NBP Retouch Tools. So that this webinar will be on there as well, but we'll send you a link to that, Susan. Camille was asking, when using the new selection tool, will using the new selection tool making a mask work as well as the pen tool? Now, yeah, absolutely. A selection's a selection. And the reason why Dennis was using a pen tool is because of the nature of the geometric shapes of the hard lines and the curves and the arcs and everything. And that's where the pen tool makes cleaner masks. Now, a mask is a mask and a selection's a selection, but go ahead.
The thing I would add in is, like, select subject is a really powerful selection tool, but the thing is going to be, what is it you're intending to do with that selection, that mask? If I have a shot of a person against a background and I want to adjust the background, darken the background up just a little bit, select subject 9 times out of 10 gives me a selection that will work really quite well.
Right.
Select the subject, invert it, use it as a layer mask to make sure I'm only affecting the background, and I can just knock that down a little bit or brighten it up or shift the color, whatever it is I want to do to it. If I'm just nudging it around, if there's any faults in that selection, you're probably not going to notice it too much.
Yeah.
But one of the things I've been doing a lot is, like, for movie poster work, and one of my entertainment clients, they stream a lot of football shows. So to broadcast, to hype the next football game, they send me a lot of shots of football players taken during the game. And, like, we need this stripped out and we need them cleaned up so we can drop them in our ads and player of the week or whatever is coming up for that. That mask has to be perfectly clean because I have no idea what it's going against. And that's when I'm going to use the pen tool to go through and get that. And then I throw in a contrasting color behind it and I finesse the edge of that mask for that. We can do another episode on masking and all kinds of ways of creating masks and finessing masks, whatever for that. We could go on for hours about that.
Oh yeah, I always tell my students that your mask quality, if you will, has to be as good as your aspiration of what change you're going to make. Like, if you're going to darken skin a little bit, an okay mask will be fine to tone it. If you want to make the skin green into the Hulk, your mask has to be spot on.
Oh, yes.
By the way, any other questions, keep them coming, guys. We do have to wrap up shortly, but if you have any of the last second questions, we'll try to get to them, okay?
Yeah, I'm just changing what people see on the screen here as we're covering the talks.
Yeah.
This was something else where I had to use frequency separation for this, because for this bottle, if I turn off my frequency separation thing, here there was, not only did I have to clean these things up, but the photographer said, oh, the level of the liquid has to go all the way up to the top. You have to preserve this tube. And then I couldn't get the lighting to work on this the way I wanted it. I need to get the lighting smooth across these things. Well, how am I going to do that with conventional retouching tools? This I might be able to paint in, but how am I going to get this and all that? So that took a lot of, I made a careful mask around these guys, but that's where the frequency separation wound up giving me this. So we're at the top of the hour. We don't have time to go into this, but it's basically just applying the same tools the same way, using pen paths for things. There's a pen path I made to protect this. There's one to protect this area. There's one to strip this thing out. So it's just using those and then building your layers up and tackling it a problem at a time.
Yep. And I bet you anything, everyone watching tonight probably, or most of them anything, probably have not seen most of these processes. Now, some might, of course, but let's be honest. I would say, Dennis, 95% of my students over the years learn frequency separation to edit skin, and that's just all they know. I'm not making fun of anybody. I was the same way. But when you realize just how powerful it is, it's just simply a process, and it can be leveraged in all kinds of ways. We have a question here. Any chance the recording will be in 4K? It will not. YouTube does not allow for recording live streams in 4K. It will be in 1080. So that's the best I got for you, unfortunately. Sorry about that, Adriano, but that's the
no screen grabs.
What's that?
No screen grabs.
So unfortunately, it won't be in 4K. Sorry to say, but so anyway, gosh, does anybody have any last second questions? Drop them in there. I am monitoring the chat, like I said. But I hope that gives you guys, if you didn't know before, give you an idea, and this is simply scratching the surface of everything that can be done with frequency separation. Because at the end of the day, all we're doing is separating elements of the image, in this case, high and low frequencies, in a specific way so we can target them, right? And since we're just scratching the surface, I just want to mention here at the tail end, I'm glad you brought that up there, Dennis, we are taking this show on the road, as it were. We're going to start in Los Angeles, and we're going to do this whole thing in person. We're really going to dig deep into retouching techniques, not just product, not just portrait, everything that we can cover. Of course, naturally, what I know is portrait. I'm not going to pretend that I can edit product. That's you, Dennis. But we're definitely going to cover both sides of it, coming from the commercial and the pompous artist side. I'm the pompous artist, in case you're wondering. Okay, we have a question here. Hey guys, Brandon here. Are there any instances where you would use something other than median for the low layer? Nino, I remember you saying you like having all three options. I'll give Dennis in a minute to answer that. My opinion is every now and then I will test when I need a specific texture and I'm not getting the result I want, especially if it's something small, a small radius. I will experiment with even Gaussian and just see which one is giving me the texture that I want if I'm being really picky. Obviously, Gaussian's useless for wider radii if you're going to deal with perimeters and all that, but I hate to be so wishy-washy, but it depends for me. Now, Dennis, are there any specific instances where you might use different blurring operators for specific things, or?
I kind of tend to I've settled into the median thing as the primary way I go, but there are times when I look like, okay, I do kind of need to lose that edge or something. So I might use Gaussian. Sometimes surface blur can work as well, but probably 95% of the time I'm using the median.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. And we have another question here. Why do you duplicate the low layer instead of painting on a blank layer? And that has to do with the mixer brush, correct, Dennis?
Right. I would have to turn on for the mixer brush. If I come back over to Photoshop, if I go to the mixer brush, I would have to turn on sample all layers and make sure everything above it is turned off.
Yeah.
So it makes it a little harder to watch what's going on. I also find when I do it this way, the results get a little funkier and a little slower to update for that. So I found painting directly on the layer does work. But I think when I was working on, where did that shot go? When I was working on this one, you see here, this says low copy 2, but really this was just a paint layer here.
Yeah.
So I did do that with just a layer of paint there. So it's not always the way I go for that, but 9 times out of 10, I'm making a copy of that and working on that because I'm going to use the mixer brush on it.
Yeah.
In this case, I just painted here.
Right. Yeah. Now, in my work, which I didn't show tonight, but in my work with my skin work, if I'm painting, I'm painting with just a straight brush on a blank layer 99 times out of 100, but I occasionally use the mixer brush for specific looks. Now, Adriano has a question that for those who live in another continent, is there any possibility of an online class? Well, the good news, Adriano, is that Dennis and I plan on doing this wonderful class on October 5th in Los Angeles. And for those who can make it out, I really encourage you to. It's going to be really cool. But again, Dennis and I say we want to take this
all day in person.
All day in person.
We've limited the number of seats. So everybody will get hands-on practice.
That's right.
And they'll get hands-on attention. Well, they get one-on-one attention from Nino. Not hands-on. We're not going to touch anybody.
You're going to get canceled, Dennis.
We will make sure that you're getting to practice and learn the techniques and work them yourself, because we're big believers in until you put it into practice, it's not going to sink in. And we really want you to learn, not just come and listen to us talk. And
no fear, ask questions. There's no dumb questions. We're here to help you. Dennis has 700 years experience, I think it is. I have like 15 or 20 with retouching, but like 30 with graphic design. Yeah, we've done this a long time, but we don't want you to be intimidated. We want you to ask questions. And my point is that we plan on hopefully taking this. We have a lot of people to talk to, but taking the show on the road into Europe, and other places as well into 2025. I'm not saying once a week or anything crazy, but some key stops in some European locations would be great, as well as some other ideas. Now, I don't want to speculate too much. Canada, absolutely.
Yeah, we're looking at Vancouver, Canada.
Yeah, that's true. Canada's right there. So we don't want to speculate and make any false promises, but we are working on that. So who knows? Maybe wherever you are, Adriano, you can see us there. Now we have another question from John. Do this class in 2025. And I'll make it a point to be there. Oh, it's on your wife's birthday this year, apparently. Oh, come on, John.
Oh,
Just tell.
October 5th is your wife's birthday?
Just bring her. Just kidding.
October 20th is my younger daughter's birthday. So,
oh, that's funny.
I couldn't do it on the 20th. So
October 18th is my son's birthday. So there we go. October is definitely mine. Adriano's from Brazil. Yeah, it'd be cool to get down there. I know some people down there as well that were going to host me before, but then the pandemic ruined it. Who knows what conversations we could have about where to take this. And if you want it, please let us know, and we'll let the powers that be know, and see who we can get to support such a tour. So definitely. Let's see here. I can't pronounce your name. Is it Ghidra? Is it Ghidra Sunquist? Which layer is set to linear light? That's the high layer, correct? Right, Dennis?
Yeah, it's the bottom high layer.
The bottom high layer, correct?
Because if I make a copy of it, and if this one is set to linear light as well, it's going to double up the effect and be super extra sharp, super extra textury. So we're letting since it is clipped to here, and this layer is controlling how this layer works, we're letting the blending mode for the base high layer be the linear light and control the texture, the strength, the blending mode, and the layer mask. All for this controls everything with that. So it's just this one that has to be set for linear light. This other one is set for normal. These here are all set for normal as well. So it's just that one thing. Yeah, and don't forget, go to Dennis's Substack because he writes all this out. If you're an article reader, he's got this all spelled out on the Substack so you can see about that. Because I guarantee you, I already got a couple of DMs about this broadcast today. They said, why are you covering frequency separation? Isn't that old news? It's not even remotely old news. It's just there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of okay, I'm just going to say misinformation. People who mean well and people who don't know any better saying falsities, if you will. Is that a word? I just made a word. Saying falsehoods about frequency separation. And it's absolutely not useless. Read his article. Learn about setting it up manually. There's nothing wrong with an action. My company makes a panel for frequency separation, but flexibility, when you understand how to use the tools to get what you want, nothing beats that. So, yeah, I'm all for people having actions, making things simpler. Sure. But I also am a big believer in you have to do it manually enough times that it sinks into you. I've seen so many instances where somebody has a plugin or a filter or a tool that works, that does it for them. Like, I don't even have to think about this. Long time ago, there was a friend that had a masking filter they used. Like, it does great masks. Oh, when there's a problem with the mask, I don't know what to do. I have no idea how to fix it. Yeah. Well, if you've done it manually enough times that you knew how everything worked, if your action doesn't work, if your filter doesn't give you the result you need, I know how to fix it. I know what to do manually, and you go back in and fix it, and it's not a stopping point. Yeah. Yep. And again, I will profess that being able to be flexible when you see like Dennis's layer stacks or my own, don't get intimidated by that. That flexibility to me breeds creativity. It makes me feel like I'm in control. I have a vision, hey, I don't like what the hair is doing there. Oh, there's something on the forehead I want to change. It doesn't have to be just fixing. It can also be for creative decisions. But having the power of control in retouch, to me, is a creative tool. A lot of people are like, oh, this is a necessary evil. And I try to get people out of that mindset. If it's a necessary evil, send it to Dennis and pay him. But if you really want to get good at it, take the time, because you'll get a better result and you'll be more in control for sure. Yeah, and that is the thing, that if you're working as a commercial retoucher, your workflow has to be really solid, because one, you're not the final decision maker, and two, especially if you're working on something for an ad agency, they're going to want your layered files to be sent to their production department. Because like with the movie poster thing, the Deadpool one over in the corner there, that image is getting broken down and reused in so many different formats. So they have to be able to adapt your work to different formats. Sometimes they're moving the people around and moving the things around. If I don't have a solid workflow, it's going to break down the minute you started to do things. Like, you know what? Dennis did a great shot for this thing, but we can't use them again because look at all the nightmare we have trying to solve these other problems. Yeah. So if you're a commercial retoucher, you have to have a really solid workflow. And that's different from if you're the decision maker, you're the photographer, you're the artist, and like, it's my image, it's the way I want it to be. So it's a very different kind of workflow. But again, using the same techniques, same ideas, it's just one, you have to build things a little bit differently to a different standard. Yeah. And that kind of
that's like I said, you'll see, especially those who can make it out to our LA class and subsequent classes coming up next year. You'll see what we're talking about, how we compare and contrast how a commercial, retoucher sees it versus someone like myself. I am the art director and the janitor. I'm everything. I make all the choices in my work, but the way I approach it, commercial-ish, to me, like I said, it's empowering and it breeds creativity in my world. I look at an edit and very rarely do I not know how to accomplish something that I want to accomplish. And there's a million techniques I might approach. This just comes with time, guys. It's not like I was just born with this. You know what I mean? I've just done it with the 10,000 hour thing that people talk about. That ship sailed a long time ago. I think we're pushing probably 30 at this point. But that's the nature of it. And that's the beauty part. But you need that foundation, right? So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Dennis, is there anything you want to add at the last second here before we sign off?
No, just people sign up for, subscribe to my Substack thing, follow your work, follow my work. My website is dunbardigital.com. I'm updating the logo, so finally going to get updated logo on here, but, follow our work. Check us out on social media.
Yeah.
We are talking about doing shorter versions of these webinars on a somewhat more regular basis. So if something really targeted to a specific idea or something like that. So it'd just be short and sweet, not asking too much of you guys. It's something we can do. So just keep watching for the stuff we're doing, because we really want to share these ideas and techniques with you and help you guys learn.
Absolutely. And I know a lot of people, they see the work that Dennis does, just the work itself with all the big name clientele and whatnot. It looks intimidating. You might assume X, Y, Z, but Dennis is one of the most knowledgeable and personable human beings on the planet. So I encourage you to learn from him and don't look at it like, oh, it's complicated. Yeah, it's a little complicated, but he'll empower you to do that. Me, I just talk a lot. That's why I'm here. Now we're going to have a good time, guys. So thank you for checking this out tonight. Find us on social.
Come sign up for our workshop if you can make it.
Please do. Yeah. Day. I mean, it's going to be killer. We're going to have a good time. We have all day. We mentioned most of the work that you were seeing Dennis work on today, the product ones by Anthony Next. We will be at Anthony Next's studio actually for our workshop on October 5th. Very excited about that.
Okay.
So if you can make
Anthony's Helms Daylight Studio. It's in the Helms Bakery Complex in Culver City. Great location.
Great location. I have not been there. I've seen the pictures. I'm very, very excited. Very, very excited for that as well.
I hear Culver City's having their art show.
Oh, really?
Art festival thing that same day. So after the workshop, you can go out and catch an art festival right outside.
Heck yeah. Sweet. All right. Well, hey, guys, thank you so much. Adriano, thank you. I appreciate it as well. Again, now, Dennis's website, Dunbar Digital and everything else, but you can just look us up. My name is super unique. Just Google me. If you need to get a hold of me, drop me a DM or an email. And I'll be happy to discuss or give you information about our class. We have vested interest. We broadcast today to let people know about what we do and what we're offering because we have this class coming up, but we have a lot of other things we have planned in the future. So, it's a real pleasure. So thank you guys. I appreciate everybody. We're about to sign off. Dennis, I will see you in just 1 second. Okay.
Okay.
All right, guys.
Cool.
Thank you. And good.